Good evening. What's going on, board buddies?
I'm your host with the most infamous, the most duplicated, nuttiest, craziest Boerboel man that you ever gonna meet. What's up, y'all? I'm from Jordan Fitness, and we live.
So, what can our clients, what can a Boerboel new family expect when they pick up a puppy from you, and what can they expect that first week or so when they go home? What's some issues they might run into, and what's some joyful stuff they might see taking that new puppy home, brother?
When you're taking that new puppy, the biggest thing that I want to do to establish with the puppy is focus for the new owner. I would like to see the puppy you rewarding, focus, stick with the non-verbals. Every time you see that puppy looking at you, giving you a tense eye contact, that's when you're going to offer praise. That's when you're going to offer food. That's why I say hand feed for the first day at least, minimum.
Yeah.
I think that it's important to maintain slow, controlled growth. Right. So when we're feeding, less is best. If you can get away with one meal a day, that's important. You want to body proportions. You want to keep the dog lean is ideal. I think that the chairman spoke on it a little bit, talked about the Boerboel is a yard dog. You know, they don't have it. Traditionally, this dog was on a farm and had open space. I think a lot of what we see with the rickets comes from, or the knuckling over, is because of the muscle to mass ratio is improper. So because this dog is not active and involved with the environment as they should be, or they're not maybe running around, moving around as much as they should, because of the way that we tend to keep dogs as pets traded large percentage of the day.
Vitamin D, sunlight.
Yeah, they got to get out there in that sun. They got to get out there in that environment. They need to be strong. They need to be moving that muscle around, get it impacting with the environment to build up the muscle to support that mass. And I think that it has to do with the way that we keep dogs in the United States. A lot of us tend to want a dog to be a goldfish and keep him in the box where he can't really move around. He doesn't have that room to stretch his legs. This is so important for a working breed, for an athletic dog, for a dog that's supposed to be a functioning dog. It needs to be moving around.
Yeah. And when Jordan says moving around, he means playing, getting natural exercise with you. But he's not talking about, I'm sure he's not talking about some people going to the extreme with an obstacle course for young Boerboel, jumping up and down and stuff. So there's certain things you got to watch out for as far as exercise, because, again, these dogs are growing. Their growth plates are still open, and the only thing, one of your main jobs, is to protect his hips, bones, and joints during those growth spurts. So he means running around, and whatever jumping, whatever running, whatever playing is doing naturally as a puppy.
Right, not to the point of exhaustion. You're not trying to fatigue the dog.
You're not trying to run an obstacle course at that young age, at 8 weeks old.
What's the ideal session for you? What would you say, David?
Short and sweet. So I always say, when you're doing your actual sit down training sessions with dogs, you want to keep, you've mentioned like engagement and focus a couple of times. You want to make sure that you're starting on a high note and ending on a high note with things. So generally speaking, with our young dogs, we'll do sessions of like 5 to 10 minutes, right? And like generally no longer than that, at least initially with things as we're shaping things, right? We talked about like teaching the dog how to learn. So I might teach the dog how to follow food, right? I might be teaching the dog how to overcome certain hurdles they might be fearful of. So like if you have a dog that you mentioned, different environmental things like a vacuum cleaner spooks them or something like that, I might do engagement sessions around the vacuum cleaner while it's just sitting in the corner, or sitting in the corner turned on from a distance, doing engagement sessions around it, things like that. But ending on a really high note. You want the dog ending the training sessions wanting more, so the next time you go to do it, that they're just as engaged, if not more, as they were the session before with things.
Elaborate just a little bit when you say engagement. What exactly do you mean?
Yeah, it really is just focus. Does the dog want to do the thing that you're asking them to do to achieve something, right? So a lot of times early on in the training process, we're using a lot of food rewards. So you mentioned the hand feeding and stuff. So they're working for food. They want the food, obviously. So is the dog engaged with you? Do you have their attention because they want the thing that you have for them? And if you have their intention because they want the thing that you have for them, then you could start to shape expectations, whether in the form of obedience commands or whether in the form of other behaviors that you might be wanting.
Right. So it's keeping the dog attentive.
Yes.
Interested.
And the other really important thing to realize is, again, especially with young dogs where these training sessions are only 5 minutes, 10 minutes at max. And honestly, like, what are you going to do? 5 of them a day, something like that. So training from the standpoint of the engagement and the obedience commands is such a small percentage of your day, right? If you look at it 24 hours a day, it's only really going to be at the most probably an hour out of your day. And the rest of the time, the importance is shaping the routines that you want and setting the boundaries that you want. So I think another thing you mentioned, obviously 8 to 12-week-old dogs, one thing that I personally tell all my clients that have puppies of that age is that dog should be on a leash almost 100% of the time in the house. That doesn't necessarily mean you're holding the leash, but there should be in the house. Yes, okay. In the house. And here's the reasoning for that. Let's say the dog is not on a leash and you're trying to set boundaries of either, I don't want you to get on this piece of furniture over here, I don't want you to go into that room, or I don't want you to get into the trash can or pick up that thing off the ground or whatever it may be. If you don't have a leash on, you're chasing this dog around all the time. You're resorting to yelling at it. You're resorting to try to redirect it and stuff. And you mentioned like nonverbals, like when we're early in the training process, the dog doesn't know anything yet. The dog doesn't know, come, sit down, no, right? So you can't tell it anything. And if you're telling it to do stuff, the dog doesn't know what you want and you're teaching it to blow you off, right? So if you have a leash on in the house, you could start to shape the boundaries non-verbally, right? So let's say a dog's loose up here, right? And they have a leash on and they're getting ready to like go in that trash can or something. I don't even need to say anything. I could just get up, go grab that leash real quick, give a little pop in my direction to engage them back on me and get their attention off of that with almost zero conflict, where they never have a chance to rehearse it in the first place. Where if they didn't have a leash on, again, it becomes a game of then, we're playing and it's keep away and they're running around the house and all that kind of stuff, right? The other advantage that a leash has is my last puppy I had, he's about 2 now, but when he was a young dog, I filmed my podcast up here every week, and he would come up here with us. And in times when I needed him to just settle for a little bit, instead of putting him in a crate for long periods of time, what I was able to do is take that leash, and there's a little table over there that I literally would just loop the handle under it, and I would back tie him off to that spot, and he would learn that he had to exist within that bubble. So you're starting to create this concept of the dog learning how to do nothing by restricting some of that freedom, but them still being a part of what's going on.
You guys help me. Somebody tell me, how can I deal with a little Tyrannosaurus biting all over me?
So the issue with that is because you didn't have the dog on a leash, you're resorting to your only way to stop it is grabbing her and pushing her and this and that, which to puppies, that just seems like you're trying to play with them, right? So it starts to become this game and it reinforces the behavior unintentionally, where if you have them on a leash, you're holding the leash, the dog starts nipping at you and stuff like that. You could literally just give them a little pop, redirect them with that leash, stop them from doing it, because you're not physically interacting with them with like your hands and talking to them and all those types of things. You could almost prevent the behavior from happening and stop that habit from getting created in the first place.
Right. I always say, I use the philosophy that the leash is your direct connection to the dog. It's like your cable.
Yeah.
It's like where you're connected to the dog, but you don't have to use your hand.
So, with young dogs, it's important to realize like a lot of the behavioral issues people will hire us for at 10 weeks, 11 weeks, 12 weeks, those were all things the dog didn't just know how to do when you got them, right? They learn very, very quickly what they can get away with, what they cannot get away with. And all of these behaviors are generally very self-reinforcing, meaning the more they do it, the stronger it gets. It's fun for them to do it. So the more we could prevent them from happening in the first place, the less work we have to do later on when the dog starts getting a lot bigger and putting the kibosh on that kind of stuff when it's going to be even more challenging to do.
What other tools are essential?
Sure. So I think with young dogs, you want to have a way to redirect and prevent things, which that is generally the leash, right? That's generally going to be the leash, obviously. You want to have some sort of reinforcer to be able to tell the dog when you like what they're doing. That's generally going to be a combination of food, toys, and praise, right? And then you want to have one thing where if you're redirecting and your blocking doesn't work, so let's say you have a dog that's extremely nippy or bitey or whatever it may be, and you just holding them back with the leash they're just too persistent with it. You want to have something where you could give a little bit more of a punishment to decrease that behavior. And generally with young dogs, I'll use something like they sell something called a pet corrector, which is like a little can of compressed air, or, some people will use like a spray bottle or something like that. Something that's going to be motivating enough for the dog to want to avoid it so that every time they rehearse that behavior and you do give that consequence, that you actually see a decrease in the behavior. But I think it all starts with making sure we're not reinforcing the behaviors in the first place. So like the biting and stuff, if you don't want biting, when that dog bites, you cannot interact with them while they're doing so, right? You cannot pet them. You cannot talk to them. And you got to realize your audience, especially with Boerboels, I mean, they're big, strong dogs, right? And when they're puppies, they are cute as shit, obviously. And, the jumping and the biting and the nibbling and all that kind of stuff, like doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But you got to realize we're raising adults. We're not raising puppies, right? And when that dog becomes freaking 120, 140 pounds, That's going to be a really, really big problem later on. So you want to stop that immediately.
I always tell my clients, do not let a cute 20-pound puppy do anything you don't want a 160-pound dog doing. So setting those boundaries early, just because it's cute at 20 pounds. If you don't want that dog on the furniture at 160 pounds, don't let it on there at 20 pounds.
And on top of that, like you said, these dogs get 100 pounds by 6 months, 8 months. So they're still puppies at that age. And if you're not correcting them whenever they're 20 pounds and 30 pounds, 8-10 weeks, you got a 6-month-old dog it's still a puppy.
Yeah.
So it's still in that play stage and everything. So it's even worse than another breed that, maxes out at 80 pounds because it's going to be wanting to play. It's still going to be in that puppy stage of wanting to play 100, 120 pounds, doing those behaviors that you're correct.
Yeah, and for as innocent as it might be in the dog's head when they're rehearsing those behaviors, like people can get really, really injured by some of that. Like you get a dog that big jumping on you just because they like you, right? And they can really hurt somebody doing that.